Morning, everyone. Happy Father's Day to everyone here and to the podcast. All right. Welcome to the Mission Driven Life podcast. This is Kevin Padillo here, president of Warrior Leadership, the host of the Mission Driven Life podcast. And I want to talk to you about Father's Day, right? And what I learned about being a man and being a better man from my dad. And because look, it's Father's Day today, right? Whether you're a dad, whether you have someone in your life that you really respect, maybe that's your dad, maybe it's your uncle, right? And your grandfather. Today, I've been really honoring my dad. He taught me a lot about being a better man. He taught me a lot about being a stronger human, and taught me a lot about me, right? So maybe my dad would hear this, right? Maybe my dad could hear this podcast if he was watching the video. I hope that you can hear what I'm saying, because I'm about to spit some love, because I love tons of love from my father, right? My dad. So welcome to the podcast, everyone. If you're watching me on Facebook Live, or tuning in on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, hey, let me know that you are here, or let me know what you love about this, because our intention today is to share missions and the missions of leaders all over the world. Whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a salesperson, whether you're a leader out there who influences and brings people together and impacts people, this podcast is for you. This is where you can tune in. This is where you can dive in and understand mission, right? Because this is where understanding my mission, I've learned from my dad. I learned having mission from my father, and he taught me a lot. Now, if you have someone in your life who's taught you a lot, maybe your own father, right? Maybe your dad, maybe your uncle or your grandfather who has taught you a lot. Look, we all learn from someone. It could even be your mom, but today I'm talking about the older men in our lives, right? And I know some of us people here, they don't have dads. Some people don't have fathers. Some people don't have that male figure, that strong male figure in their life. And I totally understand what that's like, right? I've been there. But it's also been a gift for me. It's been a gift for me. Because I've also battled with my own relationship with my father, and also relationship with me and other men, right? And how I realize how I relate with my dad is sometimes how I relate with other men in my life, and how it shows up. And this is a podcast for you, for all the men who want to become better. If you're a man and if you want to understand this, look to your dad, right? Look to your dad, because that's the first person that I learned about being a man and being a good man. I'm not talking about being a troublemaker. I'm talking about being a good, strong man, right? That's what I learned from my dad. And look, today, it's important, right? It's important because, my dad, growing up with my dad, it was never easy. My dad was always hardworking. He came from the Philippines with my mom, and he's a strong man. He was very quiet. He was also very hardworking. He's a hardworking guy who pushed the limits. Who really strived to bring his family together, right? And my dad was a leader in the church, and he was the head deacon. And he was someone that a lot of people really looked up to in the church. And he was the first one that I seen as a leader in life. He was the first person that I seen that influenced and led people, especially in church. He would be, speaking in public and doing prayers and speaking for other people. And it's been a gift. This whole having this dad, it's been a gift, right? He's done a lot for our family. He's done a lot for us. That I know that he was always busy, right? You know, he was a busy guy. He was, he didn't have a lot of time on his hands, and I wanted his attention. I wanted his love, and I wanted to be around him and get his mentorship, right? So when I think about my mission, right, to build leaders, that's what I wanted in my relationship with my dad, right? I wanted to be a leader like him. I wanted to be that strong person who can bring people together. I wanted to be that person who could be that rock, because that's who my dad was, right? He's a rock. And he was during. I know he as busy as he was. I would have loved to get more time with him, but now I am, and now it's amazing. Now we have a great relationship. But with this, this is what I learned about my father, right? This is what I learned from him and parts of leadership. And he's one of the first mentors in leadership that I've learned. And he's one of those mentors that I he's a silent mentor. If you ever heard of a silent mentor before, it's someone in your life that maybe he doesn't have to say a lot, doesn't have to say too many things. He just has to, he or she, that silent mentor just has to show up and be that model for you, right? Just like he was for me. My dad was my silent mentor, someone who showed by action who he was as a person, how strong he was. He didn't have to say a million words. He didn't have to say a million things. He didn't have to talk big game. He just showed up. He did the work. He did what was important, and he led and he inspired people. That's all I could say from him. He wasn't too much to talk. He wasn't someone who spoke eloquently like one of those speakers and presidents in the States. He was a person who was strong, right? He was a person who was confident. He was a person who was loving, but also strong in adversity. When things would go wrong hard in our family, let's say there was times where, you know, I was going to jail, and there was a lot of uncertainty in my life, right? Like a couple of years ago, I was in and out of jail and I was in and out of prison. I was a gang member and my family was hurt, right? We were robbed because I was in prison. I was being a troublemaker, right? I was doing stupid things, and our family was just hurt. It was broken because my mom was always worried. She was stressed out, but my dad was always be that rock, right? He'd always be that rock who I knew would show up, and he was always consistent. That's one thing I can tell about my dad, is how consistent my dad was, right? He showed up every day. When I was locked up in jail, he would show up in jail, and he would show his appreciation. He would visit me in jail for 1 or 2 days in the weekend. Every week he would show up and just be there. My dad wouldn't have to talk much. He wouldn't have to say much. We wouldn't even have much of a conversation. But he would show up and just be there, and we just sit there and maybe have some quiet talk, some small talk, and he would, I don't know, he would just be. He was just straight there. He was just there with me. And that's what I really appreciate about my dad, right? My dad wasn't someone who had to talk much, talk big game. He would just take action. He would do things. And I'm taking that into my life because my dad always challenges me every day. He pushes me. He pushes me. He challenges me on my word, on my commitments. He always challenges me when I procrastinate, right? He'd be like, "You always procrastinate." My dad would call me out, right? And even Mike, my friend Mike Overzat, he can say that, look, families are broken down because they don't have fathers, right? And I agree. You know, I agree that I don't have that person in their life that is strong and important to my life. Because a lot of people don't. Some people don't have that father figure. Some people don't have that male figure that's there in their life. And that was like me. As busy as my dad was, I would turn to gang life to get that approval from older men to look cool. I would get that gang. I would join a gang. I would get into trouble just so I could get approval from men. And what I didn't realize is that if I spent more time with my father, right? If I spent time with my dad and my father, my uncles, I could really understand who I am as a man. And I wouldn't have to go through all this trouble. And there's thousands of people, young gang members, young drug dealers that are out here that, maybe, you know, they don't have that father figure in their life. Maybe their dad is present, or maybe their dad is dead. Maybe their dad is in their life, but they're not fully there, right? Maybe their dad is just not someone who cares, who is there, but he wasn't there. And I could tell that sometimes in my life that was sometimes that was what I would what I'd experience, right? So so I feel sad when I see a lot of men that don't have that strong role models. So they turn to their moms, or they turn to their woman, the matriarch, and they turn to the woman in their life, and they start depending on women. Where I think, as like men, if men can really hang out and really build that relationship with their father, they can understand who they are as a man, right? And that's what I've been thinking of. Because I know without my dad, if my dad wasn't around as often, I would be worse off, right? I would be going through my life, you know what I mean? And they call that the father wound. If you've ever read that book called Iron John, there's a book called Iron John, and they talk about the men and how, how father figures, there's young people out here that they're wounded by their father. They get wounded by their dad. Maybe their dad just like hits them or scolds them or criticizes